But if you don't know me, I'm Tom Schmidt, and I got a bunch of information to run through. What I'd like to do is I'll go through it all and then keep your questions for the end, and I'll stay as long as you want for questions. I probably won't be able to answer them, but we can try. So we're gonna talk about wind turbines tonight, and if they work, if they're viable, if they're profitable. And before we get started, we need to know some of the basics. And so we're going to be talking about watts a lot. Watts is electrical power. And so to get watts, you need volts times amps, and you get watts. Now, if we compare it to water, volts is like water pressure. You got 40 pounds of water pressure on a pipe, and that's what voltage is. That's electrical pressure. Amps is like gallons of water, and amps is a quantity of electricity. If you were real fast, you could hold some in your hand, but it doesn't work because it'll go to ground too fast. So if you get this, if you have a 120 volts times 2.5 amps, you can turn on a 300 watt bulb. So years ago I used to read a lot of electrical formulas. I used to go through them all and stuff, and one of them, I remember some guy came up with this, that if you have a point right here, say on a wire, and he came up with this number. He came up with this number that if you have 1.86 times 10 to the 18th power, you want to shut that off?
First question, they didn't hear your instructions.
So if you have that number of electrons times 10 to the 18th power, go past 1 point on a wire in 1 second. That's 1 amp. Now I don't know how he counted that. But I don't know how he came up with that number. If I want to find out how many amps I got, I'll just snap a meter on this wire here, and it'll say 2.5 amps. That's close enough for me. I don't have to count electrons. So, anyway, just another point of reference that we're all familiar with. I got a couple cars in my backyard, and they got pretty standard engines in it. They got like a 250 horsepower engine. And that'll generate 125 kilowatts of juice. Which is 125,000 watts. And that will make about 410,000 BTUs of heat, if you could harness it. Now, when an electrical company is going to lay out a grid for a town, they figure about 7,000 watts a house on average. If I came to your house and snapped a meter on, you might be pulling 4,000 watts. Because all your loads in a house are on, off. They're incidental loads. We call them non-continuous. Except if you have electric heat or air conditioning runs a while. So this would be enough power for about 18 houses. And if you have a gas furnace in your house, it's about 30 to 35,000 BTUs. So that car engine can make enough heat for about 12 houses if you could get it in an air exchanger right. So just some of those little things that show how things tie together. Energy is transferable, or it can be calculated. Now, Rocky Mountain Power charges about 12 cents a kilowatt right now. So if you put a load in your dryer's about 4 kilowatts, and it doesn't run an hour, it runs about 40 minutes a cycle. So your dryer would take times 2/3 of an hour. You know, does that give you 2 2/3 kilowatts about? We'll say it's 3 kilowatts. So it costs about 36 cents to dry a load of wash. If you got a water heater, those elements are about 4,000 watts. If you got a cold tank, a 40-gallon tank, you start from cold, it takes about 90 minutes to heat that water up. So that would take about 6 kilowatts. That would cost about 72 cents. If you got a hair dryer, they're about 1.5, I think. How long does it take to dry your hair? 5 minutes?
Maybe.
5 minutes? Huh? Lawrence is pretty quick there. So is Ken. But okay.
Between us, 2.5.
But anyway, you can dry your hair for about a penny. But we're worth it, you know. So that's kind of some of the basics of electricity. Now, Rocky Mountain Power pays $0.04 a kilowatt wholesale. That's what they buy the electricity for generally from a wind turbine or solar. About 4 cents a kilowatt. We're going to be talking a lot about watts. That's what it's all about, because that's electric power. It's what the electricity does. It turns on the bulb, it turns on the motor, stuff like that. So if you got 1 watt times 1,000, that equals a kilowatt times 1,000, that's a megawatt. And that's 1 million watts. And a kilowatt's 1,000. Generally, everything is measured in kilowatts for dollars and cents on your meters and stuff like that. If you got a 100-watt bulb and you turn it on for 10 hours, it'll use 1 kilowatt. That's how it is. That's one way to reference it. So, if you got a clothes dryer, it's 4 kilowatts. You run it 1 hour, it's 4,000 watts. That take 4 kilowatts. So that's what we're going to be. This is the main thing right there, the kilowatts to megawatts and watts. So. So, how many barrels of oil can you get out of a brontosaurus? See, they always talk about fossil fuels. There's no such thing. It's organic fuels. It comes out of the earth. Oil is created by the movement of the plates in the earth. That's why you can drill a well in 1980 and it runs out. You cap it off, you come back 40 years later, it's full of oil again. The earth plates are always making oil. It wasn't a bunch of dinosaurs died in one spot and got covered up and stuff like that. Oil is made by the earth. It's a renewable resource. It's an organic fuel. And it's aggravating even when oil men talk about fossil fuels. Now they use that term fossil fuels to scare you, because if you think about fossil fuels, oh man, how many dinosaurs were there? We're going to run out. So they want you to think it's going to end someday. We use like 15 million barrels of oil a day. That's a lot of T-Rexes. It's just stupid. And the Russians came up with this in the early 1900s, that oil is made by the moving of the plates in the earth. It's always being manufactured. I read a book years ago called Black Gold, I think. Something like that. And they explain that in there. During World War II, there were 12,000 capital ships sunk during the war. And they're all full of oil. Now, like an aircraft carrier takes about 80 gallons a mile, or a big ship, a battleship. So they had big tanks on them. They sunk down in the ocean. It's all gone. The waters are all clear along Guadalcanal and that area there where there was a lot of ships sunk in World War II. It's all clean and clear because the oil is organic. It got consumed by bacteria in the ocean water. It's all gone. So it's just, you could call oil a renewable resource. It's always being made. And coal, I don't know much about it. I didn't look into it, but those coal strips in Gillette are 90 feet thick. That's a lot of palm trees. You'll never convince me that that's palm trees. There may be a wood fossil in there, a tree, but it wasn't made from palm trees and vegetation, or leaves. It doesn't make any sense when you look at it like that. So, but it's just one of those pet peeves I have. Don't be fooled by these people who call it fossil fuels. Like this commentator in Cheyenne has a good handle on it, Glenn Woods. He calls it organic fuel, organic fuels, because it comes out of the earth. It wasn't made in a plastic factory or something like that. So, oil is a natural resource. It's organic, just as much as wind is, or whatever. Anyway, there's a guy to look up on YouTube, a lot smarter than me. He got a long name. Too long. Okay. There's a guy, Michael Schellenberger. I don't know, anybody ever heard of him? But anyway, just look him up on YouTube. He's a really good speaker. He used to be in the green movement. And one day he finally took out a calculator and some paper and figured out there's not enough surface area in the world to power it with solar panels and wind turbines. There's not enough surface area to replace all the coal-fired power plants and nuclear and gas plants. There's not enough surface area. So, but you got some really good YouTubes. So if you have time, they're about 20 minutes long, and he gets right to the point. So, and they keep pushing this renewable energy, or this alternative energy, and it's expensive. Without the subsidies, they couldn't build it. And there's this guy from Russia who lives in England. I can't think of his name, is Koisikon or something like that. Really good speaker. Gets right to it. But he brings out the point. The people in China, India, Africa, and South America want to be prosperous. They want cheap energy. They're not going to buy this stuff. And nobody's going to be able to stop them either. I think China has 100 coal plants scheduled to go online. And India's building coal-fired generator plants as fast as they can. And they're buying it from Australia, which is dirty coal. Wyoming has clean coal. But these people in other countries, they're not going to sit in the back seat forever. They want cars, air conditioning in their houses and stuff like that too. And so they're going to go with cheap energy. They're not going to go with solar and wind turbines because they can't afford it. So yeah, this guy is just a real well-spoken guy. Really funny to watch. He's got a great accent, but little skinny, nerdy looking kind of guy. I think he's bald. But I'm trying to think of a YouTube title. You could look him up, but he takes on the woke people in England in debates. So. Well, I'm going to talk about wind turbines a little bit here. If you're going to make energy and make a lot of it efficiently and quickly, this looks like a really lousy design. Because anything that's going to go wrong is going to happen up here. You know, any problem. And this is always 200 or 300 feet above the ground. If you got a problem, there are no small problems with a wind turbine. And when you drive by, you can't imagine how big they are. But this thing here is called a nacelle. This big unit up here. At work, we would just call it a head house because of where it is. And nacelle sounds like some kind of French wine. So I'm just going to call it a head house. Now this piece of equipment weighs between 200 and 300 tons. And they got to lift it up here. This nacelle is about as big as this room and twice as high. That's how big those units are up there. They're big. They're a lot bigger than you think, but you lose how big they are because they're up high. But they're about as big as this room and probably 2 stories. You know, that weighs 200 to 300 tons. And so it takes a special crane to get it up there. Now in this nacelle is of course there's a shaft and there's a gearbox with about 80 to 100 gallons of oil and grease in there. And there's a 5 megawatt generator up here. Now, you can look these generators up online. Hospitals buy them sometimes for standby power. A 1 or 2 megawatt generator will fit on a semi-trailer, a regular one. A 5 megawatt one takes the special low boys with about 5 axles or 6 axles. The generator weighs about 70 to 75 tons, and that's up in here. So you got a lot of weight, and all the controls are up here. Anything goes wrong, it's always up there. There's no problems down here. The only thing down here is a little transformer with some wires. And there's no moving parts down there. Now, there's something people don't tell you about. But in this head house, they have to keep it heated. And they use electric heaters to do it. Because they got to keep that oil and grease warm for the gearbox. So I talked to one of the electrical inspectors. He said they have heaters in there. I don't know how big they are. I couldn't get a hold of him, but to keep something like that warm would take about 25 to 30 kilowatts of heat. A normal house takes about 10 kilowatts. Now when the blades are turning, they're powering their heaters. When the blades quit turning, the contactors snap back to the grid, and then they suck juice off the grid to keep those heaters going. So, but they got to keep the heat in there.
So there was a fire by Crystal, or Granite Canyon.
What's that, Ann?
There was a fire by Granite Canyon, by the Roundhouse Wind Project. And property owners were concerned, and Glenn Woods wrote about it, because the gearbox combusted.
Oh,
And the developer, the maintenance people, didn't really do anything about it. They determined that they should let it burn, and the wind was blowing. So then the debris was landing on people's property.
Yeah.
So they were worried it would land on their grass or their home.
oh, okay. So there was a fire up in
So
here?
It gets to how the public doesn't understand this. So a lot of people that posted locally about this, because they took their own pictures with their phones. That's how we knew this happened. It didn't hit the press. They took photos with their phones. They thought that it was a lightning strike, but I mean, it's heated inside, so it was probably a mechanical malfunction.
Could be, you know, I don't know. But there's a lot of equipment up there, and it's always high up in the air. You know, it's not like working on your car. It takes a lot to get up there. So, I'm going to read a little quote from Warren Buffett. Everybody heard of Warren Buffett?
Oh, yeah.
You should. Berkshire Hathaway. He's got some great YouTubes on. Him and his side Munger. They got the driest jokes in the country. You know, they're funny to listen to, but they're about as dry as a Russian general. You know, that is. They got these jokes. But Buffett told an audience in Omaha, Nebraska recently, for example, on wind energy, we get a tax credit if we build a lot of wind farms. That's the only reason to build them. They don't make sense without the tax credit. Now, Buffett owns, I think he owns Rocky Mountain Power, doesn't he? I think it's one of his, you know, shares or something. But so one of these units, they figure it's about 1.5 million per megawatt. So if you got a 5 megawatt unit, which is pretty common, that's about $7.5 million. Now,
One turbine?
what's that?
For one turbine? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
about $7.5 million. Sorry about that. I'll just go. Now, that project by, I think it's called Cherry Creek, south of Rollins.
Yeah, that'll be the biggest wind farm in the world.
Yeah. They got 600 units, and it costs $5 billion. And that's about 8.3 million per unit. So that comes pretty close. 2/3 of that is subsidized. So 8.3, what's 2/3 of that? Quick. We'll say it's 6 million. That's close. We'll say it's 5.6 million. But 2/3 is subsidized. And some states give them another 10%. But, you know, Warren Buffett won't lie to you. He says they don't make sense without the tax credit. If they didn't have the tax credit, they wouldn't be going up. Now these units, I figure each turbine, the maintenance is between 40 and 50 grand a year for each unit. So this place out here, like Cherry Creek, they got 600 units, and it costs $40,000 a unit per year. So just the maintenance out there is about $24 million a year. I don't know if that counts employees or not. But you can imagine the maintenance costs on these things. My brother in Iowa, he lives in an area where they have a lot of wind turbines. And he sent me a picture a couple months ago. I wish it had been a video. But they're coming to do some work on a wind tower. And so they're bringing in the crane. Now these cranes, you don't just ship them on a truck. The train came on 15 semis.
15 seconds.
See, these cranes, you guys know what a big maniwak is with a 400-foot boom? Or anyway, these cranes look like a suspension bridge. They got two big booms up. And it's quite a project just to build one. They have special crews that go around and build them. But anyway, it takes 15 semis to bring one of these cranes on site because they got to lift this thing off. And it takes a small crane and a medium-sized crane to build the big crane. I mean, these are big projects. Just building some of these cranes, you know, it's just, you don't get them from A1 rental, you know. But they have to be able to lift this thing up maybe, or lift a generator out and put it on the ground.
Well, when you look at Roundhouse, those are about 475 feet tall. So when you look at the project announced on NPR, Rail Tie Wind, those will be 675 feet, some of them. So that would be equivalent to the Space Needle, or to, in our neck of the woods, the Devil's Tower.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. And then there are two new large projects in northern Albany County. One is called Two Rivers Wind, and they're proposing wind turbines the height of the Eiffel Tower. So they can go up to 875 feet tall. And also, they have a project that sits between Banff National Wildlife Refuge and Wheatland Reservoir 1. And they will do a 6-phase wind build out. So they will do phase 1 through 6 with turbines. And not all of them will be that height, but they will have turbines that height. And that's why the wildlife concern is that they're not, they don't have a way to do that. They claim that they can paint the blades, but they don't do it. And it's not researched enough to know.
Yeah, I don't know how they get cranes big enough for some of these units, because on these bigger ones, that thing's about 400 feet in the air. So that's a lot of stress.
Rocky Mountain Power went in front of the Public Service Commission, and they pushed to get it approved before the Eagle study results were turned into Wyoming Game and Fish. But then they had to order their turbine parts. And so they had to get an answer by March 1st. And so I'm assuming that they'll start construction this summer. So you'll see the transport of parts, and you'll see the laying of road work on the first phases for that project. Because the PSC approved it, because it was part of the Trans-East and Trans-West power grid.
Now, once they build a wind farm,
It's not.
you know, I know they got a tower every 20 acres or something. They got to build roads out there.
Yeah. Rail tie is 52.
And they're not just grass roads. They got to be able to carry heavy loads. I mean, like, you know, this is 250 tons. The tower is about 500 tons. The blades are about 20 tons apiece. And I've read there's about 4,000 tons of concrete and steel in the ground. Now, once that's in the ground, it's there forever. It's not coming out. It's kind of like the pyramids, you know. It's not movable. It's there forever. Now, when these things go down, I mean, this is recyclable, and there's a lot of valuable stuff up here, but they don't know what to do with the blades yet. You know, they bury them in landfills. They bury a lot of them in Casper.
And there's a kid in Arlington who makes a living. He knows the Ramza family.
He what?
He knows the Ramza family, because I talked to
Oh, okay.
Ramza, and so he's getting paid $30,000 a turbine to deal with the shaft, but they're not recycling. So he hauls it. That's part of what they pay him to do, is he hauls it to Casper to go in the landfill.
Oh,
In
okay.
the designated area where they're burying blades.
Okay. Huh.
So it is recyclable if
But
they
they're
would
not,
do it.
correct. At least at present they are not.
That's what he's paying.
Well, we could have a little fun here.
Tom, what are the shafts made of?
This one here,
No, the shaft.
And nacelle.
the tower going up. Oh, it's pretty thick steel. I've been close up to them.
So it's steel.
Oh yeah, yeah. My brother and I drove around Iowa one time, and they were putting some up, and you know, it's like about that thick, you know, and it's got to be pretty heavy. So, let me see here. So we're going to do a little formula here. You know, we have 365 days a year. And let's say we get 8 hours of good wind a day. And we got 5,000 kilowatts. And this factor here is how efficient these units are. It might be less or more. But you know what something is rated at is not what it puts out. You know, something is always rated, like I see these little lawnmowers that says 5 horsepower. I look at them and laugh, you know, because when I was a kid, we had lawnmowers with real 5 horsepower. You could take the guards off and go through a grove and cut trees about that big with them. These lawnmowers today, they won't do that. They're not really 5 horsepower, but they rate them at that. So something, whatever something is rated at, is not what it puts out, because nothing's 100% efficient. For example, like a motor, 1 horsepower in a perfect world takes 746 watts. But if you have a 1 horse motor and you turn it on, I'll guarantee it's going to take about 12 to 13 amps, which is about 1,440 watts. So it takes more than what it tells you in a physics book. And so most things are about 50% efficient. And so if you take these numbers here and times all these, what's the answer? Anybody got the answer here yet?
7,300,000.
What's that?
7,300,000.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, that's how many kilowatts that unit will make. Now times it by 4 cents.
$292,000.
Right again. That 292,000 is how much money Rocky Mountain's going to pay for that juice. Okay? That's how much money that turbine will produce in a year. About 292,000. But it cost $8 million. So take the $8 million and divide that by your 292,000. What do you get?
27.4.
Okay. It'll take 27 and a half years to pay off. How long does the wind tower last?
10 years now.
You give about 15.
Tower with the blades.
If you're
10?
10 years for the blades, and they're replacing new blades with new blades, which is a whole nother conversation because they got subsidies to say they're bad blades. So they're trucking good blades to Casper, they're putting them in the ground because they get paid to put up new ones. So they're filling more blades in the ground that we could have utilized them. Because who's to say it's good and bad? Nobody's there to rate the blade. So they are playing games.
You guys want to pass these out? These are little scorecards too, or formula cards for calculating how much money a wind generator will make. But so, if you're lucky, you'll get 20 years out of one,
So
and they're not paid for yet.
part of the reason I think this is happening and listening to the news is they made an announcement on NPR. It drives my dad nuts. I listen to NPR, but I want to hear what is being told to everybody, like it's fact. And also WPR. And JP Morgan is really pro-financing wind development because they haven't done a lot of financial lending recently. So they're really excited about this global. They want to lend to European nations. They want to lend to us. They want to do this because they want to make money. They want to lend money and then get money back. So that's an agenda with them. And I thought, well, that makes sense. And I listened real close because there's a guy that lives by,
That's a picture of a 5 megawatt generator.
it's huge.
Now there's 2 units go with that yet. One's of air filters and the other one is cooling units. But that just gives you an idea how big they are. And that sets, 300 feet in the air here.
The new CEO of World Bank, and World Bank normally doesn't talk about this. They've now started to talk about how they want to be focused on global warming. And I'm hearing that and thinking, why are you as a bank doing this? Are you going to redo all your banks? What are you going to do? And now it clicks with me because they want in on the financial loan game too. So it gets to how they don't say that to the public in a soundbite that's been prepared for them. You have people that are supposed to be running, they're the CEO of World Bank, they're supposed to be dealing with banking, and they're talking about how that they have to be focused on global warming. And it's because they're trying to ride this. It's a marketing thing, in my opinion, to really dumb it down. And they're going to do it as long as we subsidize it.
I'm going to tell you a nasty little secret they don't tell you about very much. Here we got a generator, a coal-fired one, liquid gas. Say this is up in Wheatland. Now this thing, I'm not sure what voltage comes off this generator, but it'll go through some big transformers and they'll get it up to 300,000 volts so they can shoot across the country. So these lines are going across the country, and say they stop off in Laramie here, and they go to a substation, and then it goes to Kimball, Nebraska, and it goes to a substation there, and it goes to North Platte, and it goes to a substation there. They go to these substations and they vary how far they drop it down. Some lines they'll say for the university because they got some 17,000 volt lines in the university and stuff like that. But then they'll break it down and they'll bring it down to the neighborhoods, and those are about 7,000 volts, those lines you see over your house. And then they got a pole here with a transformer on it, and it goes in that, and it goes into your house at 120, 240. That's kind of the mechanics. Now, there's some moving parts in here. There's big contactors in here. There's insulators, which you think don't move. And even these big wires are going down the line and stuff. And it all works because this thing turns 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the same speed. It just goes and goes and goes. It's like driving your car 50 miles an hour. Car will run forever. You just gotta hit the gas stations and the rest stops. Car will run forever. Because it's constant. It never changes. But when you got solar panels and wind turbines here, they go to like at the base of a wind tower, they got a transformer, and it probably jumps it to about 7 or 13,000 volts, and it'll go to a substation, or it'll tie into this system here, maybe through a big battery system. Might be a battery there, and it ties into here. Now these wind turbines, say you got 100 turbines going, and the wind stops. And all of a sudden there's no juice here, and they got to pick up here. It's like a jolt. Now you ever turned off a big water pipe and just went like this? You know, it'll snap the pipes maybe if you're not careful. You got to turn it off real slow. You got to open it up real slow. Otherwise, you might break pipes or the joints will come loose. So the wind turbines stop moving because it's nightfall, the wind's down, and everything is affected. Even the wires going cross country will bounce around a little bit when that shifts, when that changes, when it turns on and off like that. And the solar panels are the same thing. They got these batteries, they're trying to work on what they call a soft start to bleed it into it. But you know, some of these batteries, they say, are as big as a football field. I don't know how you get a soft start. We use what they call soft starters on big motors. It's like a capacitor, you know, otherwise in the old days you'd turn on a switch and that motor just gets a bunch of juice, you know. But they got these soft start units we put on, it kind of winds up the motor over about 5 seconds. But when you have a system like this system, it's like hitting the brakes on your car and then jumping on the gas. It's always that jolt, that stop, start, stop, start. When the solar panels, when it gets dark, the solar panels go off. And so something's got to give here. All of a sudden they lose, you know, 5 gigawatts of power. It's like taking a water pipe and just slamming it off. So all these parts are moving, and the insulators sometimes fly apart, and there's big contactors in these switching stations because they shoot juice in different places of the country. They shunt loads depending on how they want it. Upper Kelly, there's a big thing, it's an east-west switching station, and the loads go from east coast to west coast through that station, and they shunt loads off depending on who needs more power. It's just a big switching station, but there's huge contacts in there, and there's big fuses and big switches in there, and they last forever with a coal-fired generator or nuclear or gas, you know, because it's always going, you know, just like a Ferris wheel, it never quits, you know. Or it's just like driving your car 50 miles an hour down the road. Lasts forever. But this is something that causes a lot of damage. They even have to replace steel towers once in a while because of the movement back and forth when that power goes off and on. So it's just one of the things they don't bring out too much, but it's a lot of wear and tear on infrastructure that's not there with a nuclear plant or anything like that. Sometimes I go driving, you know, when I'm doing insurance adjusting, sometimes I got to take this road from Craig, Colorado up to the interstate. And it's 100 miles. There's nothing there, you know. You could put a nuclear power plant behind 2 rows of hills, you'd never see it. Nobody would know it was there except if you flew over it, you know. But everybody knows where wind towers are. You know, you can't hide them. You could put natural gas plants all over the place. Nobody would see it. And the coal plants burn clean enough. I don't know why that's a problem, but I think with this stuff here, we'll eventually start getting brownouts like they do in Oregon and California. Yeah, Ann.
Well, so there's a gentleman, his name's Kevin Kilty.
Who?
Kevin Kilty.
Okay.
He is retired faculty at UW just this year. And when he was at the PSC, he warned the economist with Rocky Mountain Power and the Public Service Commissioners that in peak points during the summer, they can't load power onto the grid. And I don't quite understand it. He should be here tonight, but it has to do with peak demand and what.
Well, I'm glad he's not. He'd make me look too dumb.
Well, he says he would love this though, because he's like you, he loves to explain. So he brought charts and he explained to the commissioners. But it gets to how they won't be able to actually get the power out because it's summer and it has to do with the load capacity even on large lines like Trans-East and Trans-West. So they're not going to get the energy that they're claiming they're going to get.
Yeah, he should do one next level up, you know, for a crowd of people and explain what he knows about it, you know.
Well, so he's been.
But he's talked to Rocky Mountain Power about it, and Rocky Mountain Power is owned by Warren Buffett.
Yeah, they have an agenda.
And Warren Buffett says we make a lot of money for our investors because it's subsidized. And see, I don't like the word subsidize. It's taxpayer money.
Right.
Okay.
Worse than that though, because the commissioners, Wyoming only has 3 public service commissioners. So
Okay.
we watched it happen with Rail Tie Wind, but you have 3 county commissioners. And we watched different commissioners approve wind projects. There are 9 wind projects that have been approved in the past 4 years. And there have been different commissioners during those 4 years. So it gets to how they don't have regulations in place to not approve a project. And even though it's contributing, because people have done the math, it's contributing less than 0.01 cent per something with the state holdings. That is how they claim it for the public school system. But they can't deny it because the developer's threatening to sue the county, right? Because they don't have the regulations to decline granting of the permits and applications. But I go to that because your public service commissioners, Mary Throne and the other 2 gentlemen, aren't going to stop Trans-East and Trans-West in the state of Wyoming. I mean, they would fire Mary Throne. She can't say no. That would look bad for the governor, whoever the governor is. So it doesn't matter if they're a Republican or a Democrat. It's flawed.
So it comes down to, let's say I had a ranch that was failing, and you get about $8,000 a year rent for every wind tower. It's awful tempting. But personally, I'd rather have an oil well than a wind tower. You put up the wind tower, you know, it's there. You know, I would probably try to opt for something else.
Well, they do want to claim that it's a failing ranch, but I want to point out when you look at Rock Creek 1 through 6, it is Cliff Hansen's son.
Matt Mead?
No.
His son-in-law?
Guy, Craig Thomas. Peter Thomas, right? It's the Double X Ranch. It gets to how ranchers can own ranch property not where they live. They own agricultural land, so they're much more apt to lease ranch land that they don't live on. So it's fine to ruin this county, because I live in that county. Or what we saw with rail tires, it's fine to lease in
Is it
Southeast
the
Wyoming,
end?
'cause
Not
I
yet.
live
Good.
in
Yes,
Colorado.
I want.
So, yeah, it's just money.
Now, I've read in different places, wind power gets about 44% of energy subsidies. You know, and they create about 4% of the power.
Wyoming has no moratorium on, or they have a moratorium on wind and solar, which means oil and gas and coal have to pay a tax, but wind and solar do not.
But from everything I've read, nuclear power is the most efficient of all the generation, because, you know, if they put up a nuclear powered plant, like say it's 2 gigawatts, it'll produce about 92% of that consistently. So it's one of the most efficient and, you know, long-term things to create power that there is. And I know people are worried about, what do you do with the spent rods? What do you do with all that? Oh, you can put them on my backyard and I'll heat my house with them. Because there's a couple guys in town who would know how to do it safely. That Linford character. And who's the other guy?
Is he still in town?
Huh?
Is he still in town?
Oh, he's between here and Germany all the time. Linford and who's the other guy? Dave. But those two guys could put them in your backyard and do it probably safely. But it's just, everybody's looking for the hard solution, the most expensive. You know, this is an expensive way to make energy. I call them lawn ornaments. People put them up in their yard, you know, and stuff. And, you know, I've put them on, I mean, I've wired a couple of them, and they say they're 2.2 kilowatts. Okay, fine. So when the wind's blowing good, I snap a meter on, they're putting out 800 watts. You know, 800 watts will run your garbage disposal. Now, the only way to make those things pay is you can't sell that power back to the power company, because you're only getting 4 cents a kilowatt. The only way to make them pay is to put up a battery bank, and that way you're using kilowatt for kilowatt. You know, you make a kilowatt, that way you don't buy a kilowatt from the power company. That's the only way to make that stuff pay, is you got to have a battery bank. But you can't just sell it straight to the power company and make anything. So, but that's about all I've got. Brielle asked me if it was the end yet, so I said we're close. But anything else? Any other questions about it, or?
Can you go into solar power at all? 'Cause this is all just on wind. Do you know?
This is just all on wind. Solar is another topic. I don't think.
How about efficiency, if you could summarize that compared to this?
Well, solar has its advantages and disadvantages. At least with solar, if you got a problem, it's on the ground. And it's like a Lego set. You can pull a panel out and replace it. It's not like one of these things. But they got their own problems too. Like when you put up a solar farm, you know, you got to clear the land. And like in Nevada, they had to get rid of all these turtles that lived in the desert, you know.
Putting a large solar installation.
All this stuff, you know, it's a huge project. I have friends in Nebraska who put up solar farms.
Yeah.
They put up some pretty good sized ones in Colorado and around the country. And I've not looked into it too much, but at least with a solar panel, there's no moving parts. The trouble with the solar panels are in building them, the minerals it takes to build them. A lot of rare earths, lithium, and then there's the disposal problem again, because they're kind of a toxic dump site. whenever they got to get rid of them. Yeah, so these things they're all a problem too. I think they'd probably be great on your house, solar panels or out in your yard, but to try to run the country is not hardly feasible.
Albany County has good solar regulations for Laramie City, but there are no solar regulations for the county. And the city of Laramie, the Laramie City Council approved a large solar project along the Laramie River because they want to be net zero by 2030 is their agenda. And I watched it and couldn't really react because I hadn't educated enough, and it happened fast, 5 minutes to 10 p.m. in 2021, in March. And this is the new point of Laramie. Laramie is a valley, so you have 9 wind projects that sit along the Rocky Mountain corridor. That's the 287 I-80 corridor. And then you're going to have a solar project on the Monolith Ranch. And then you're going to have a rare earth mineral project by Crystal Reservoir. And it gets to how the public announcements are only printed in the boomerang, and they're hard to catch, and they're last minute, and they're not informative. They don't give facts. So you need to keep your eye out, because this is your home and this is happening to you and your kids. And to just go along with some politicians, I don't know that you want to do that long term.
See, we seem to have this craze that all problems will be solved if we can make enough electricity. And electricity is the worst way to heat your house. It's the worst way to heat your stove. You know, electricity is really good for some things. It's the best way to run a motor.
And these
But
are
it's
all
so-
out of country quite often, definitely out of state. But the wind project that I mentioned, Two Rivers, they're out of Canada. And Railtie Wind is a global energy equity company, and they created ConnectGen. It's Quantum Global Energy Equity. So, and the rare earth mineral people are out of country as well, but I don't remember. They're from Australia. So I do think it's subsidy hunting.
But there's just some things you can't replace. Electricity doesn't create iron ore. You know, it's just, but there just seems to be this climate where if we make enough electricity, everything will work. And it's just not, it's just one part of it, one small part of the whole economy. You need iron ore, you need bauxite, you need big machines to dig this up. You need diesel to run those machines. You need fuel oil. And you can't replace all that with electricity, but everybody thinks they can replace all that with electricity. And it's just electricity is just one small part. You know, like the worst way to heat water is with electricity. The best way to heat water is with gas or propane, you know. But these crazy people want to run everything on electricity. This energy secretary we have wants all the military vehicles to be electric vehicles in 15 years or something. You know, how you gonna, you know, if you had an Abrams tank, the battery would be bigger than the tank to run it. You know, but these people are nuts. The trouble is they're sitting where they control this stuff. And somebody else is probably paying their power bill or something, but electricity does not solve all answers. It works good for some things, but not everything. You got to have these other raw materials. Oil, gas, fuel oil, diesel. You can't live without it in a prosperous economy. And that's why these poorer countries in the world are going to go with coal-fired generator plants. and natural gas. They want to be like us. They want a car. They want a refrigerator. You know, they want a clothes dryer, just like Americans. They want to be prosperous. And you can only have a prosperous society with cheap energy. I think electricity in Germany went to 37 cents a kilowatt. You know, how long can they do that? I don't know. So, I don't want it to happen here. So, to me, all this is a pipe dream. It's a fairy tale that's made possible because we have a country that's run on printing press money. There's nothing behind it. If we didn't have the Federal Reserve Bank, this wouldn't even get off the ground. It wouldn't even be an idea. But it makes it because we just print money and we kind of pass along as taxes on all of us. So China doesn't have that kind of money. They don't have that system. Neither does Brazil or Arabia. They have to live within their means. So they're going to go for cheap energy. They can't print money because nobody else will recognize it. But so far we keep printing money and people recognize it yet because we're the reserve oil currency of the world. And that may change. And then all these projects, they may stop dead, I don't know. But that pretty much covers what I want to cover. So, thanks for coming out. I hope it was worth your time.
Yes, thank you.
It's over, Brianna.